you today evening. We are going to start the third lecture of City Lights. City Lights public lecture series from Calcutta Research Group, which is supported by Canadian Institute for Advanced Research, CIFR. We had two lectures, one in academy by Professor Ranobir Samadar, and the second one was held at RBU. The speaker was Ritojyoti Bandopadhyay. And here today we are again holding this lecture, and we are very grateful to Goethe Institute, Max Muller Bhavan, Kolkata, to the director, Astrid Veje, and to all of you who have made this time and who have gathered here today in the evening. To begin with a little bit on what this City Lights public lecture series is about. So it started generally as we conceptualized it as a public lecture because urban studies and studies on city are very much limited to the classroom. We know that in the last few years, there are many courses, departments, disciplines on urban studies which has come up even in India in different institutes. But the discourse on city cannot be only limited to the classroom. So our initiative and our aim has been to bring it out of the classroom, to hold it outside, to collaborate with cultural institutions like Max Muller, like many others in the city of Kolkata, and with educational institutes too within the city. And of course, as the program, as the note we circulated also describes, we are trying to talk about the changing face of city in its different forms, the way urbanization, the way development, the way city is the melting pot and has been the melting pot for centuries. And we know that there are many representations, cultural, political, about the city. The city is also the node where people come for work, for livelihood, for many other activities. And as we have seen that it is very difficult also to grasp the urban, and it is becoming more and more difficult to grasp the urban, the unchecked flow of capital, the unchecked flow of goods, services, people, and the unchecked precarities and vulnerabilities that all of us face today. To read from the excerpt of the concept note, drawing its name from Charlie Chaplin's iconic 1931 Ode to the Poetics of Precarious Lives, lived in the interstices of wealth and prosperous spaces of the city, the lecture series City Lights will concern itself with the creation and recreation of the city in its phenomenological complexity, historical specificities of labor and wealth, its materiality and mobility, and with its present life as a palimpsest of the pasts. At the same time, as a site of logistical reorientations and infrastructural activities as part of a frenzied and continuous envisioning of a future. The future of the urban takes place in the city through the interaction between technological innovation and imaginary planning, and enacted fantasies of change and enforced closures and reclamations of planned space. The urban future, governed and upended by politics of the city and the urban political, is also caught between aggression and care, violence of plans and regulations, and the contingencies of the informal, visions of the future and imaginations of the past, between generations, between greed of property accentuated by practices of profit-making and assertions of justice, care, and protection. Lectures in the series will reckon with the making and unmaking of the city in the history and space. So today's lecture is on cinema and the city. And today we have our esteemed chair, Professor Ranobir Samadar from Calcutta Research Group, Distinguished Chair of Migration and Forced Migration Studies, and Professor Samata Biswas from the Sanskrit College and University, both of whom I call to the dais so that they can take the chair. And they will carry on from here. I hand over the mic to Professor Ranobir Samadar to introduce the speaker of the day. Thank you.
Welcome to the evening program. I think Poshali has wonderfully and very aptly introduced the lecture series, uh, and I do not want to add anything to what she has said. Uh, the only thing that I can say is that it's not city and cinema, but as you can see, it is city as cinema. And I'm quite sure that Samata will bring that out. This is the City Lights series is part of the only thing that I would like to add is that it's a part of not so much a research program, but a kind of engagement with the entire idea of the urban futures. So the question of temporality, how do we visualize the future of the city, or for that matter, our own future, because we are all in one way or another urban animals. Even those who do not stay in the city, they too imagine themselves as living in the cities or visiting the cities. So in some sense then, the urban future is also our future, and there may be many futures. It's not that the entire humanity would have one single or common urban future. At the same time, there will be also variations in temporality. I remember the present government on the verge of assuming power in West Bengal in 2011 said that, the leader said that she would like Calcutta to be London. And there was an economist who said, why London, why not Singapore? So Singapore or London, besides the fact that one is an Asian city, the other is not. But more significantly, Singapore is the kind of future that London doesn't represent. So there are variations in our imaginations of future, also the time. There are instances, significant instances, where the present is being made in the form of bringing in the future. So in that sense, the future is not in the future, but the future is right now here, in our own present, in our own actions, in our own thinkings about the future, which then influence us and model our own practices of time. In any case, I would not like to waste time anymore, but it's a pleasure for me to introduce today's speaker. Dr. Samata Biswas teaches English at the Sanskrit College and University, Kolkata. Her areas of research interest are body studies, migration studies, Dalit studies, gender and popular culture. At the Sanskrit College and University, she teaches courses and texts related to gender, caste, partition, and colonialism. For me to add is that even though she specializes on this, but since she is a member of Shiarji, she is made to work on many other things. Am I right? Which you may like or may not like, but you have become specialist in many other areas. Samata is the editor of the special issue of Refugee Watch, titled as Politics, Space, Memory, Identity Making in the Wake of Partition. She's the co-editor of Situating Social Media, Gender, Caste, Protest and Solidarity, published in 2020, and the special issue of Onneshi broadsheet on contemporary politics, on violence, 2017. She has also helped in conceptualizing and curating 3 short documentary films on Calcutta, migrant city. Samata is the book review editor of Refugee Watch, a South Asian journal on forced migration. It is the journal of CRG, and a member of the editorial collective of Refugee Watch Online, a blog on forced migration, again run by the CRG. She regularly writes scholarly and popular articles in both English and Bengali. Over to you, Samata. How many? 1 hour. Okay. I think I will sit there.
Thank you, Poshali and Ranavidya, and thank you everyone for coming. I am extremely nervous. I was very nervous, and then in the last 1 hour, I have managed to make myself even more nervous. So if something does not work, if you do not like how the clips have been edited, I will show a few clips from Mrinal Sen's chorus. The fault is entirely mine. I am not an editor. I am also a very bad pirate. So I have not done a great job. I will be speaking for something close to an hour, interspersed with images and also clips. Maybe we can reduce the light on me, or at least reduce the light on screen. There's a lot of light. Anyway, okay, so as you can see, the title of my presentation today is City as Cinema, the Choric in Mrinal Sen. As you know, this is part of Calcutta Research Group's series of public lectures on the city of Calcutta titled City Lights. As you also know, this is the name of Charlie Chaplin's 1931 film, City Lights. The iconic tramp in the big city goes through a series of misadventures. He is mistaken as a rich man by a blind flower girl, and he goes to jail trying to get money for her eyes. It is completely coincidental that I am trying to talk about Mrinal Sen in a lecture series titled City Lights. But Charlie Chaplin was not incidental to Mrinal Sen. In 1953, Mrinal Sen wrote the Bangla book, Charlie Chaplin, an overview of Chaplin's life and works. In 2013, he published Amar Chaplin, which was later translated into English as My Chaplin. This is just a comment on Mrinal Sen's connection and attachment with Chaplin, but also perhaps the first of many coincidences that we will talk about today. In the heated public letter exchange between Sen and Satyajit Ray about Mrinal Sen's film, 1965 film, Akash Kushum, in which Satyajit Ray famously called it a crow film is a crow film is a crow film on The Statesman, Mrinal Sen draws on Chaplin to justify his aesthetic and cinematic choices. Later, Chaplin comes to his mind when searching for a story which will eventually lead to the 1974 film Chorus. More on this when we discuss Chorus. We may also want to remember that the first cinema hall in Calcutta was the Elphinstone Picture Palace, which was later renamed as Chaplin Cinema in 1980. Chaplin is central to the cinema viewing culture of Calcutta, which goes back to the 1890s, almost immediately after Europe had its first projection of the moving image. Ronita Chatterjee shows that on 20th January 1897, remember in Europe we are watching cinema for the first time in 1894, so on 20th January 1897, a cinematographic moving image was screened in Theatre Royal, which is a newly constructed stage inside a hotel on Chowrangi Road in the White Town. 11 days later, on 31st January, an animatograph was shown in the Black Town at Minerva Theatre. Although the audience members were different for the different locations, often the same films, at least their second runs, will be screened in both spaces. Jamshedji Framji Madan started his career with regular tent cinema shows in Calcutta Maidan, a stone's throw away from here. He went on to establish on the left the Elphinstone Picture Palace and soon producing Satyavadi Raja Harishchandra in 1917. We know the Elphinstone Picture Palace was named Chaplin in the 1980s, carrying as long as it survived both the honor of being the first cinema hall in Calcutta, as well as a marker of Calcutta's cosmopolitanism. Now, we also know that although parts of Calcutta during colonialism were designated as white and black towns, the division between them was not watertight. Similarly, people who went to these theaters to watch cinema were also not uniformly white or uniformly native. The educated Bengalis often came to the cinema halls in the white town, such as Chaplin, to watch Hollywood and other European cinema. Along with European soldiers, they would buy the cheapest tickets, while the British would buy the more expensive ones. Now, these viewing practices tell us something about the city and how cinema makes the city. Here's a sentence from Anushtup Bosu, and I'm extremely grateful to him for letting me take a look at his unpublished lecture, The Choral Voice of the City, that he delivered last year at the Mrinal Sen Centenary Conference in University of Chicago. I'm quoting this sentence because it comes closest to the claims that I am making today. After cinema, the phenomenal city is therefore cinematic. Calcutta and its history is not incidental to today's presentation. There are three predominant ways in which the connection of cities and cinema have been discussed in existing literature. Number one, as I showed through Ronita Chatterjee's discussion, actual cinema infrastructure. So setting up of entertainment districts, screenings, viewing public, contribute to the physical construction and logistics of the city. Second, cinematic urbanism goes hand in hand with urban modernity, developing laterally and vertically with urban growth. Think about the early 20th century films like Metropolis, which if you have not watched and if you are interested in cities and cinema is a must watch. And third, the one that is most discussed is the question of representation. Cinema represents and representationally creates the modern city. We know the most discussed, admired, and watched films by Mrinal Sen are his so-called Calcutta Trilogy. Coming at the same time as the Spring Thunder of late 1960 and early 70s, Interview, Calcutta 71, and Podatik continue the turn registered in Mrinal Sen's filmmaking since his till then most successful film, Bhuvan Shom. So Bhuvan Shom is 68, which is where he uses some of the techniques which come to their full force in these three films. Shayondev Chaudhuri thinks Calcutta has been present in Bangla cinema from the time of the studio films. I am grateful to Adrishoda here for pointing me to this volume. It was released on Monday, and I got it then because you showed it to me on Sunday. So Shayondev Chaudhuri says that Calcutta has been present in Bengali cinema from the time of the studio films, but rarely has she been physically present, more often than not. Calcutta is reduced to a name, silent, disembodied, confined to the studio. This changes in the 1950s. 50s capture some of the bustle of Calcutta. In 60s, Mahanagar and Jyotugriho framed some memorable scenes of this bustling, transforming, agile metropolis. This is my translation, it may not be accurate. Now, instead of preparing the city for cinema, Mrinal Sen brought the narrative to the frank, unself-conscious, tireless boulevards. The frame of cinema extended itself to embrace documentary. Curious onlookers were captured on film. The hero started a conversation with the crowd. In art cinema in India's Forgotten Futures, Rachana Majumdar shows that these films, especially the Calcutta Trilogy films, have shots featuring all the important landmarks of Calcutta. So they have Calcutta University, the High Court, Dalhousie Square, the All India Radio, Victoria Memorial, the racecourse. Can you play the first clip? We know that the tram is going to be stopped, right? And as part of the mobilization efforts for the tram, to save the tram, the clip that was most used was this. This is from Interview. So here we have the physical infrastructure of the city. The double-decker bus, the tram line, the cinema poster, the Charminar cigarette, everything, the ambassador car, but the physical infrastructure is not the only way in which Calcutta comes in Mrinal Sen's film. From Paradise Cafe to a political cinema, Moinag Biswas reminds us that from interview one, we were looking at interview, Mrinal Sen started interrupting the narrative with shots from Calcutta streets. Processions, political meetings, assembly of starving people. He had started shooting that footage from 1968. Calcutta 71, Podatik, and Chorus incorporate the same material from the streets. It lends the films an indelible sense of urgency, an enhanced weight of reality. Mrinal Sen had sensed that, captured at certain moments, reality can seem more real than usual. We know this. When in Calcutta 71, we see some footage of students protesting, Sen was caught by some young students who asked him, when did you shoot this footage? Tell us, when did you shoot this footage? Because they saw their friend who had disappeared in the footage. So if this was shot in 71 or 72, they wanted to think that the friend might still be alive. Not surprisingly, this is the most remarked upon aspect of Sen's filmmaking. I will also talk about this, but I will draw on not the trilogy, but if there were a trilogy which had 4 films, then the 4th film, Chorus, a film that anticipates the emergency. After Podatik, which was made in 1971, Mrinal Sen writes, I glanced through books that came my way. He was desperately looking everywhere for ideas. He goes back to Charlie Chaplin. I envied Charlie Chaplin, who, at a pretty old age, said he would never be able to retire because ideas just kept popping into his head. I recall Gabriel Garcia Marquez once telling me in an intimate conversation that ideas come to me through images. And as for István Szabó, the Hungarian filmmaker, there were stories scattered all over. But silly me, I could think of nothing, see nothing. My mind and eyes grew weary. Strangely, an idea had come to me once, just once. That was in early 1974. What was the idea? He was going to the Reserve Bank of India. He saw a line, an unending serpentine line of men and women, young and not so young, waiting patiently, unmoved. It was a huge queue, the like of which I had never seen before. I forgot all about my appointment at the bank and walked along the line of countless people, watching them, talking to them. I gathered they had come from various districts to buy job application forms. So he rushed to his friend Mohit Chattopadhyay, a college teacher and an eminent playwright who also dabbled in the theater of the absurd, and he said, I want to write about this. Please collaborate with me on my next script. I will write about a huge crowd of 30,000 or the double of that number or even more, waiting for days to collect application forms from a particular counter within a well-guarded fortress, buying forms from a counter or two, then depositing the same. Law and order remains dreadfully active all the time, until eventually the applicants turn violent and attack the impregnable fortress. The chairman of the fortress would then declare emergency. Remember, this is 1974. The most powerful person in India would also soon declare emergency. So later on, Mrinal Sen quotes the maker of the 1968 British drama If, Lindsay Anderson, and he says that today's fantasy world would turn out to be tomorrow's reality. And we see that in 1974. This also gives us an idea about the form of the film. So he was toying with the idea of making a film where he could do away with the narrative structure totally. So he had 2 gurus that he was drawing inspiration from. Eisenstein, who said that I'm going to make a film on Das Capital, and Vartov, whose kine eye, so the cinematic eye, he thought the camera is an instrument like the eye, and it is best suited to observe and record reality. So the camera is best suited for documentary filmmaking. And Vartov would go on to become the chairperson of the Soviet documentary cinema world. So, and there was, of course, Godard, who was experimenting with various forms. He felt an urge to walk on this forbidden path. Now, what is Chorus? It begins like a fairy tale. It starts with a ritual. a bard appears on the screen and sings. That bard is Rabi Ghosh. We'll see him soon. Glory be the new gods who have descended to the earth. The chairman of the gods, concerned over the problem of want, arranges for 100 jobs. But thousands queue for them. Too many people, too many faces, too many problems. The crowd gets disillusioned and popular discontent is mobilized. As word spreads that this is just another hoax. These gods reside in a castle, they declare an emergency, hundreds are arrested and tortured, but there are whispers that 30,000 people, 30,000 people are here. There are two parallel stories to these 30,000 people who are standing in Kolkata streets. There are the hungry workers of a striking mill and landless peasants. The chairman of the gods remains confined in his own barbed wire as the screen explodes with 1,000 voices and faces. Today, we do not know what was the queue that he had seen in front of the Reserve Bank. But we have a bit more information about the second queue, that is, the number of people marching from some place to another place. Dipankar Mukhopadhyay is saying that at that time, Mrinal Sen had read a piece by a poet, Golam Kuddush, called Ekshate. It was a moving reportage about how a group of CPI workers had walked all the way from a place in the Bardhaman district to Calcutta to participate in a rally. He thought that these two ideas could mix well, but he required the form of a fantasy, something apparently unreal, but which would ultimately give a true picture of reality. Now, Dipankar Mukhopadhyay was slightly mistaken. The book was not called Ekshate, it was called Ekshonge, which you can see also means altogether. This was published twice, first in 1955 by National Book Agency, and then again in the 1980s. This is a narrative recounting the 150-kilometer march by 92 striking workers of 3 factories of the Martin Burns Limited in Raniganj. Poet Golam Kuddush, then a journalist with the Shadinata Potrika and a member of the Communist Party, accompanied the workers on foot, sending daily dispatches to Calcutta via other comrades. On the way, the workers are hailed as heroes. Villages and towns compete with each other to feed the workers, and they had been striking for 6 months. So this was often the first square meal that they were having. The unions on the way feel energized with their march. This edition was published due to the efforts of Choric Dotto, the same Choric Dotto who will be killed in 1971. The second edition has some new information. I'm translating from the Bangla. So there's a new introduction which has been added. Kuddush is writing, in between, this book, Ekshonge, tried to raise its head from oblivion. In fact, it wanted to take the shape of the silver screen of cinema. Late Ritwik Ghatak wanted to recreate this on screen. I tried to deter him. It is madness to want to make a full-length feature film from an event which does not have a plot, nor any adventure. But Ritwik Babu was seized by the desire to do something new. Finally, the absence of funds made the project die. After Ritwik's death, Sri Mrinal Sen came to my abode with a similar request. Those of you who have watched Mrinal Sen's chorus, you know that he could make use of very little of the book. Ritwik died in 1975 after chorus was made. 30 years later, Kuddush's recollection must have been significantly altered. But when I read Ekshonge today, and then when I watch chorus, I'm struck by how much of the book remains in the film. From the song of the marching laborers, to the women blowing conch shells, from the man called, I think, Bhim Mondol, who abandons home to join the marchers. Kuddush's meticulous documentation of the historic march finds itself abundantly in the film. Here's a glimpse. Please excuse my really bad piracy and editing skills. Number 2. It's sung in Hindi and it is sung in chorus. In a Chitra Bikhan interview in 1974, the interviewer asks, the name chorus smacks of theatre. I feel like asking, is the mode of expression in this film a bit theatrical? If you have you deliberately made it theatrical? Mrinal Sen decimates the question. He does not want to be a formal purist and practice untouchability in the realm of art. That is, he doesn't want to say this is theatre, this is cinema, and they must be separated. Ultimately, he says, the practice of art is undoubtedly a social process where the artist's primary responsibility is to use whatever arsenal is at his disposal for communication. Chorus is undoubtedly cinema, but theater has been made part of this cinema to increase the acceptability of its message. In so doing, chorus becomes a giant cinematic experience. Reality and fantasy constantly enter into each other in chorus as they please and when they are needed. This interview is important for another reason, because we understand what Mrinal Sen understands by chorus. Chorus, we know, has been used in this film in many different senses, in different ways. The word has become quite unremarkable due to its different uses in our mundane lives. In an academic sense, chorus is that character in Greek theater who appears on the stage at a certain crucial moment and fulfills the duty of a commentator. A little like the Shutrodhar of our traditional plays, the one who connects the thread of one action to the other. The word chorus is also part of the songs sung together, sung in unison. In short, in our film, the word chorus signifies something larger. When the larger-than-life desires of many people come together, many words, when all the people, many struggles fuse together, creating a musical note, a melody, a collective emotion and desire, that is called chorus. This film actually uses both forms of chorus. First is the traditional chorus, which is the figure of the Shutrodhar. Led by Ravi Ghosh, there are three interlocutors. Same person, Ravi Ghosh, dressed in different religious garbs. First, he's a Vaishnavite, then he's a fakir, and third, if I were to call it a religious garb, he's a clown. The clown says everything is a bluff, a sham. We will come back to this voice and ask whether this is the only voice that lends the film its name, or are there other similarly melodious, rhythmic voices, unidentifiable in their origin, who undermine and define the male baritone in the film, coming from different sources, who urges the public at large and some specific publics to maintain order. In the film, punctuated by the choral voice and flashbacks, choral voice and flashbacks, the audience sees a castle. This castle is actually a model by Khaled Choudhury, which has a beeping wireless antenna. This image also I got from Adrishoda's house. This is from the book Khaledda by Sudeshna Bosu. In the film, punctuated by this castle is the site from where the forms are being distributed. 2 rupees per form, 100 jobs, as many forms as you want. There are helmeted police marching up and down to keep order. There are people talking about the microphone, asking you to keep order. There's a journalist who's going up and down with his camera and the recorder. The audience learns 3 different backstories of people who are in the queue. Remember Mrinal Sen in front of the Reserve Bank, walking up and down the queue, learning the backstories of the people who are in the queue. A young woman who lives in a rented apartment with her mother and sister, who wrote her examination 8 months ago, but her result has not come out. The son of an ailing farmer who has TB because he doesn't have enough to eat, and the son of a factory worker, a strike breaker, who had hoped to get the son of a job. This strike breaker is Mukherjee, who had once led that 50-mile march across rural Bengal, walking to Calcutta with much fanfare. As the crowds increase, the selling counters are shut. The chairman and the board receive calls in the middle of the night. Letters come, further calls come, which tell them 30,000 job applicants have met somewhere secret, and they are going to destroy the conglomerate. And then, very importantly, they're going to dance on that destruction. Rumors about the 30,000 spreads around the city. The radio and the newspaper try to motivate citizens to keep up the good work. Applicants are arrested by the police. 1,500 people are arrested. In an emergency-like situation, there are frames on the screen that freeze on the anguished faces of young men who are being beaten up. However, perhaps the 30,000 are never going to come. Maybe they were never going to come anyway. But at the end of the film, the chairman is navigating a barren, craggy landscape behind barbed wires, while control on the wireless informs him they have no control over people's dreams. At the end of the film, we'll watch this documentary footage of massive processions in Calcutta in the 60s and 70s merge with fictional recreation. And at one point of time, it becomes impossible to tell which part of it is fiction and which is real. This is something that most commentators did not like. Amitabh Mukhopadhyay in Cine Central didn't like it. Amitabh Chattopadhyay. Dipankar Mukhopadhyay in 60 Years in Search of Cinema did not like it, but the one person who did like it is Shomik Bandyopadhyay. He thinks that chorus creates a symbolic circle of the conflict between the establishment and the protesting self. The symbolic cycle arranges itself through real events. Now we know that the biggest symbol in this narrative is the castle. Sorry, I'll go back to the castle. In Akshonge, remember Akshonge? The workers, Ghulam Quddus reports, are ecstatic in the prospect of their impending march. They are 92 workers walking to Calcutta, 150 miles away, and I just want to tell you the composition of these workers. They are all men, 35 Hindustanis, 3 Muslims, 3 Munda, 5 Bauri, 3 Dom, 1 Hari, 1 Bagdi, and others 41. Which gives us a clue about the song being sung. There is a reason why there is a Hindi song being sung in a march in Bengal. Now, as they set out for their journey, several of them can't sleep. Most of them can't eat. Someone compares it with the march towards Chittorgarh, the fort at Chittor. As the march progresses, this transforms into a capitalist progress. Amra Punjibader Durge jacchi. Repeatedly, the narrative in Akshonge tells us, Punjibader Durge hana dite jacchi. In chorus, the first Durgo, this Durgo is literal, created by none other than Khaled Chaudhuri, and I want you to remember the cover of Akshonge, which is also done by Khaled Chaudhuri, 55. This is done by Khaled Chaudhuri, 74. Khaled Chaudhuri, we know, is born Chiroranjan Datta Chaudhuri, multi-talented theatre worker, artist, sculptor, singer, folklorist, revolutionized Bengali cover art, but also Bengali stage. Khaled and Mrinal had made as early as in 1947 to work for the IPTA, the Indian People's Theatre Association. At that time, and this is why I'm saying city is also cinema, clandestine screenings of Eisenstein's films were held in different parts of Calcutta. Clandestine because the Congress government of independent India did not like the communists. Mrinal would inform Khaled of such films. Sometimes he would explain the significance of some such shots, and then he said something funny. Some words were popular among film enthusiasts, jump cut, montage, etc. Those like Khaled, who did not like film so much, they would mimic them by saying, instead of jump cut, arm cut. In 1974, when Khaled was suffering from his annual bout of asthma, Mrinal asked him to draw a castle. Inside the fort, there's a man. This is the description. Inside the fort, there's a man. But he's not just a man, he's a system. They have their own army, their own cannons, radar, wireless communication system, ammunition factory, office, and prison. Khaled Chaudhuri drew a 15-inch by 10-inch drawing, a castle neither Western nor Indian. And then, with the help of his carpenter, Krishna Chandra Rai, Keshta, Khaled Chaudhuri made a fort, 1.5 feet tall. This is that fort. 1.5 feet high, 8 to 10 feet in breadth. They divided this up in 3 parts, carried it to Calcutta studio, assembled it, and then proceeded to shoot it in extreme close-up, enlarging what we call today macro, because they did not have macro lenses, so they had to shoot like really close-up. This coming together of Ghulam Quddus, Khaled Chaudhuri, and Mrinal Sen in multiple ways and forms across time and medium is possible only in this city of ours at a time when their political beliefs were both being celebrated and tested, using different documentary elements from Akshonge to create a film of mythic proportions without any clear boundary between the fictional and the factual also becomes possible only when the city becomes cinema. I shall venture to say that the blend of documentary and fiction creates the choric polyphony of the text, which is both a characteristic of this city that we live in, but also the public that he's making his film for. In an article, Mrinal Sen is saying that there were 3 instances of spectacular mass mobilization in Calcutta that he remembers. Calcutta of 1949, Presidency and Alipur Central Jail, jam-packed with protesting people. Guns and sticks attacking people inside and outside the prison. In resistance, in protest, the people of Calcutta, farmers from the villages, workers from industrial areas are coming forward. Women, men, old and young, everyone. 1949. 10 years later, 1959, Mrinal Sen was shooting in Mankor village of Bardhaman, 100 miles from Calcutta. One day they heard that Kolkata is in uproar. Farmers from all over Bengal villages have come to Calcutta, joined the procession. They're marching towards writers. The proud building beside Lal Dighi, not to disobey, but to demand the right to eat twice a day. 10 more years, 1969. We know what happens in 1969. Many things changed temporarily for a little while. Common people were flabbergasted for a little while, but at the very moment, next moment, resistance sprung in every nook and cranny of Calcutta. Now, Mrinal Sen identifies 3. I will remind you of many more that aren't listed by Mrinal Sen. In 1951, the United Central Refugee Council, UCRC, and the RCRC, the Refugee Central Rehabilitation Council, protested in the streets of Calcutta against the eviction bill. In July 1953, there was a month-long movement against the 2-paisa tram fare hike, which began with people boarding the tram and refusing to pay the fare, and sometimes they would board the tram with the exact change, so that if you will take 2 paisa from me, take, otherwise I cannot pay you. In 1954, there was the teacher strike. In 1959, the 100,000 and more strong rally during the movement, at the end of which Jadavpur University Vice-Chancellor and colleagues raised a black flag in protest against the government policies and atrocities. In the 3 moments that Mrinal Sen identifies, we've already heard of 69, 70. Now let us look a bit more closely. I do not know whether you have heard the other mythical story about Calcutta, in which Louis Malle wanted to shoot footage of Calcutta streets in 68, 69. So he's in Calcutta, he's telling Mrinal Sen, Mrinal, I'm fascinated by the crowd. I have to make a film on it. And when I asked him, do you have any script, any idea? He answered, no, but there's a crowd. There are so many faces, so many stories to tell. Mrinal Sen said, I don't think you're going to be allowed to film anything because foreigners are not allowed to cover sensitive situations, but you come with me. So they went together with the cameraman and sound recorder. Suddenly, and I will read this a little more carefully, a jeep stopped in front of me and a man got down and he was the commander of the operations there and I knew him well. Well then, you are the commander of the operation. And he said, unfortunately, yes. So I said, a friend of mine is with me, a foreigner. He said, sorry, I can't allow him to film. I can't do it. My hands are tied. And I said, well, he's not a political activist. He's just interested in the crowd. He wants to see how the crowd in different situations behaves differently. That's all, come on. He's from France. And the moment I said from France, he said, a filmmaker. What's his name? I said, Louis Malle. And then he said, Mrinal, Louis Malle is here. Oh, I love his films. I must meet him. So I introduced Malle to my friend, and he said, I saw your film last week, and there's a name I cannot pronounce. I know French. I learned it at Alliance Française, and after my diploma, I translated a poem of Louis Aragon. And all the time, this commander was waiting for the students to arrive and for the fight to start. Louis Malle pulled Mrinal Sen by his sleeves and said, Mrinal, all this could happen only in Kolkata. This man who is going to beat the students to jelly is talking about French literature. There are many manifestations in Kolkata because there is often an excess of political passions. Excess is exactly how Ashish Rajadhyaksha understands the use of documentary footage in the Calcutta Trilogy. He says, are spectators merely anonymous masses, fearless crowds? So people who are watching the film, are they anonymous crowds? Or are they to be moved to take action for a political cause, undertaking a political mimesis upon seeing images of bodies in struggle? The radical film, he argues, derives its power radically from political events it depicts through its use of documentary footage. Now, Moinak Biswas has already reminded us The footage of the 1968 students' protests can be seen from Calcutta 71 in Padatik and then in chorus. In fact, the exact shot of Ranavidya is in Louis Malle's Calcutta, and it's also in Calcutta 71. I was going to show it, but you are chairing this session, so I'm not showing it. Two filmmakers, one making a documentary, another a fiction, using the same material to very different ends. So Malle is using the same footage to make his documentary Calcutta. Mrinal Sen is using it in Calcutta 71, Padatik, and in chorus. In The Rumor of Calcutta, John Hartnick tells us that Reinhard Hoff, in his 10 Days in Calcutta, recognizes the use of the same young boy at the Maidan, performing on top of a pole, as he's in Louis Malle's Calcutta, he's in Mrinal Sen's Parashuram, and in Hoff's 10 Days in Calcutta. So what makes it different? How is Louis Malle's work different from Mrinal Sen's work? It is the inclusion of Mrinal Sen's voice. In Hoff's 10 Days, Mrinal Sen asks the boy, have you seen him? The boy says, yes, he is lost in this city. We need to be able to read the city in its layers, in its space influenced by its time, and I argue Mrinal Sen does exactly that. He layers the space of the city with memories of past processions and future ones. In the final segment, I'm almost done, I will talk of two ways in which this layering happens. Layers that undermine the authoritarian, the governmental, the establishment. This layering is both oral, we hear it happen, and visual, we see it happen. First, the visual, we have the uniform type of the newspaper, of the application form. It is attacked, it is undermined by the handwritten posters and banners of the workers and the farmers. The meaningful real signifiers, so there are words that mean things, and then there's a word which means nothing, because we don't know whether the 30,000 are at all here. But everywhere we see a proliferation of the letters 30,000, which by trick of looking or by dint of miscalculation can easily become 3 lakhs or 30 lakhs. The city space is invoked. There's a hint of a tea shop, there's a hint of a tram, there's a hint of something passing one by, while the castle is very detailed. We see the exact shape of the phone, we see the color, not the color, but the hair in Utpal Datto's face. We see the color or the urdi of the guard. So when we don't have something in detail, it opens up possibilities. It allows us to imagine our own city into existence. There is a lot of cross-referencing. The title credits roll with images of famine, of emaciated, near-dead bodies. Any audience will identify it as also used in a similar manner in Calcutta 71. Now, what purpose does this serve? Why should we have a film called Chorus, which is about people standing in a queue, and beginning with a montage of famine? Can we have the next clip, clip number 3? This is not a chorus, I do not know what is, but this also brings me to my point about the sound, the oral. The voice of Utpal Datta, who's the chairman of the gods, is drowned by the cacophony of the city. Just as we can, beyond a point, no longer make out who is acting and who is actually present in Calcutta at that point of time, we can also no longer make out who is saying what, except that whatever they're saying is drowning his master's voice, which was coming out from the megaphones. I'll talk a little bit about his master's voice, not do it all. Can we have clip number 6? You have the radio telling us how to be good citizens. This is a voice that is there in the film, but is this the voice that we remember in the film, or do we remember clip number 7? So I think you noticed some guy coming and asking, "Eta ki gan?" And in the next shot, he's the one who's singing the song. In Ekshonge, Golam Kuddush records Haradhan Rai, the union leader, singing "Bade chalo Krishan Dheer, Bade chalo Mazdoor Beer." For the first 2 days, no one else sang with him. The third day onwards, some did, and finally, passerbys also joined in. So what I am saying is, this is a soundtrack which is very, very catchy, and it's very easy to remember, unlike the voices that we have been listening to all this while. But there is also a documentary aspect to this. This is something that Golam Quddus is recording in Ekshonge. And who is Golam Quddus? We will look for a little later, but before that, let's think about how the spoken Bengali of the narrative is also undermined by the Hindi song in the film. Here I want to go back to what Mrinal Sen says about Podatik, which was released the year before, and he was asked, the woman who shelters the revolutionary, why is she a Punjabi woman? That is Simi Garewal. So Mrinal Sen is saying, when we make a Bengali film, all the characters are Bengali. When we make a Hindi film, all characters are Hindi. And when we make a Malayali film, all characters speak in Malayalam. But in a metropolitan city like Calcutta, it was perfectly natural for a Bengali to meet and build a relationship with a non-Bengali, for a Bengali to get to know Marathi. This vision of the city, and this is what I am saying, this mercilessly maligned, dangerously loved city is also a city of migrants, a city of polyphony, of many voices, of multiple identities and identifications, a city that a migrant like Mrinal Sen himself can make his home. Now, so when we have this, and I already talked about the composition of the group that is marching to Calcutta, right? Which is predominantly a Hindi-speaking group. So, what happens to this film practice? This that we saw at the end of the film, it does not come back in Mrinal Sen. After this, he moves on to what he calls inwards. After this, he moves on to other spaces. He makes films in Oriya. He makes films in Okauri Kotha is in Telugu. So he does. Why he stops this practice, I do not know the answer to this. But what we can say is that what happens if how does this film practice make us rethink the city that we know as a cinematic city? Now, he is saying that when a filmmaker is making a filmmaker is not merely practicing art. Revolutionary and radical art has a responsibility. And at this point of time in history, this responsibility can only be fulfilled with the inclusion of documentation. Documentary. And I've also said for him, documentary is not merely what is shot by the camera, but also what has been recorded 20 years before him by a journalist. And we will end by talking about the journalist's camera and tape recorder. In the course of the march to Calcutta, the leader of the workers from Raniganj asks, in Ekshonge asks, is there anyone who had walked to Calcutta during the 1938 strike? There was only one, Jyoti Baudi. Jyoti Baudi was asked, what is the difference? You were walking in 1938, you are walking now in 1954, what is the difference? Mr. Baudi says, the crucial difference was, in 1938, no one cared that the workers were marching. In 1954, everyone cared. Remember, Golam Quddus walked with the marchers every day, writing his dispatch with borrowed ink, an overdose of food and shared cigarettes. Twice or thrice, photographers from Shadinata Potrika traveled with him, taking photos back to the city. The daily dispatch would travel to the city by train. By the time they reached Howrah, the statesman was keen to interview the workers. They had become national news. In chorus, Shubendhu Chatterjee, the journalist, travels with his tape recorder, recording and later playing back their stories. By taking photos, helping people see that which he is taking photo of. A stand-in for the reporter who was marching and the filmmaker who was walking the city streets. Can we have the clips again? Before they start shouting, this man with the drum says, ধামকুড়া করি বাদ্যি বাজাও ৩০,০০০ই বাদ্যি বাজাও ৩০,০০০-এর সাথে মিশে যাও. They decide to become one with the 30,000 to participate in the dream of change. We know that in Ekshonge, the workers of the Martin Burns Company were not victorious. They walked 150 miles in 10 days. They were celebrated, they were tired, but their talks with the government and the owners failed. They were not given minimum wage. So the promise was not upheld. But what we find in chorus is the promise of a dream, promise to participate in the dream of change. So even within the narrative, we find fiction and fact coalesce, dreams become realities, or let us have the opportunity to dream and the city becomes cinema. Thank you.
So friends, you have listened to an interesting and also, I think, a provocative lecture. We will take some questions, maybe for 15-20 minutes, and then we shall close this session as of this evening. So Samata has agreed to take questions, so anyone who wants to ask, please introduce yourself, raise your hand, and yes, please introduce yourself.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes, it's working.
I'm Priyanka Mitro, a PhD scholar in Rabindra Bharati University, Department of Bengali. Excuse me. My question is that can we say that the city has become a character in Sen's movies? That's all.
You take a little more and then... Yes, please. Little louder.
Good evening, ma'am. Thank you very much for a very, very stimulating presentation.
Please introduce yourself.
Anindu Sundorpal. If you could go back to that clip where the song is being sung in Hindi and we see the procession going down the path, where on one side of the contrast that you showed between the patterned printed English 30,000 applications, contrasting that with the Bengali handwritten poster, Hindi poster, Dunya ke Mazdoor Ek Ho. We see a similar contrast perhaps on that scene where you have the barbed wire fence and the pachil on one side of the road with very neat patterned trees, very well decorated, urban beautified trees on one side of the road on the pavement, and on the other side of the road it's completely banjar, it's completely bare with no pavement at all, and the road in between is sort of the divide between the haves and the have-nots, the neatly urban beautified one side of the road and the completely fallow other side of the road. Thank you very much for showing us a little bit of the end clips as well, because I wasn't aware that Ananda Shankar had scored the music for chorus, which now makes it more plausible because his sister Mamata got her big break in Mrigoya just a few years later. The use of cacophony and chorus, as you mentioned, the way it has been juxtaposed with the very percussive nature of the background score to denote the different movements. How much of a backbone do you think makes Ananda Shankar's score as part of the film? And another thing that really comes to my mind, because you mentioned Mahanagar and Jyotugriho as depicting the urban Kolkata in the film, when it comes to Ritwik Ghatak, the other centenarian we are celebrating this last year, a lot of how Kolkata is shown brings to our mind Bari Theke Paliye of Ritwik Ghatak, the one film for children that he did, where the child is as much the protagonist as Kolkata is. Would you perhaps see that as a companion piece to how urban depiction in Bengali cinema is? Thank you very much, ma'am.
Any other question? We shall take two more. So, yeah.
Well, my name is Sandeep Banerjee. I am film TV artist and reporter. In your lecture, we saw some very good cinemas of Mrinal Sen, in which we saw that there are so many labor strike procession lectures, etc. We know that Mrinal Sen is a famous film director in the world, but can you explain or think that Mrinal Sen, like a film lover, also be a lover of the labor worker or factory workers in his cinema, by which he want to explain the audience about the labor workers' problems?
I have no. My name is Mahanirban. I'm a cinematographer, a film scholar. I just was add something. There are 2-3 corrections. First, the first cinema has been shown not in 1894, it in 1895, 28th December. Number 2, Ritik Ghatuk died not in 1975. He died in 6th February 1976. And the third one is a most important thing. Man with a movie camera by Ziege Vertov. You say it's Vertov. Is Mikhail A. Kaufman. Basically, his name is. Ziege Vertov is the sound of camera. And Ziege Vertov is the sound of camera as per the Russian pronunciations, kind of. His name is Mikhail A. Kaufman. Actually, his name is Mikhail A. Kaufman. It's a 1927 silent film, Man with a Movie Camera. And the cityscape, basically, the urbanscape, as Ziege Vertov shown in his 3 hours films of Man with a Movie Camera, it became a movement in the second phase of Godard's. You know the last... Godard. Jean-Luc Godard. Okay, so the first phase of Jean-Luc Godard says ended in Bande Apart, you can say it's in 1966 film. From 1967, 1968, the Sorbonne University students made the last left block, okay, against the Gaulle. And did then Godard for the last 3 years, basically starting from 1968 to 1971, say started a movement called Ziege Vertov movement. And Mrinal Sen was the connector of that thing. From India, say Mrinal Sen was a part of that Ziege Vertov movement. Okay, so, and in chorus, and the urban trilogy made by Ritik Ghatuk, and say it's not, by Mrinal Sen, and say are part of Satyajit too. Say Satyajit's urban trilogy. We can't say Mahanagar in 1964 is a quite earlier film, it's an urban film too. Your name of the city as cinema, the Choric in Mrinal Sen's, and you ended in the, say, it is very interesting that you say, spoken of the thing that Indira Gandhi actually announced the emergency in 1975, but those are because of there's a bank thing. So he started, says, nationalizing the banks and the economy of India in a way. So, and it connects with the Reserve Bank line. You say that make the interests of making of that kind of urban thing to Mrinal Sen. So that 2 things actually connects in a way of your research. Thank you, ma'am.
And so there's a bit of a mistake also in Ghulam Quddus, but he's a far greater person than me, so we also forgive him. Yes, I agree with your what you're saying about Vertov, which is why Mrinal Sen is doing what. Yeah, but I am quoting what Sen is writing. I am not commenting on him, the filmmaker. I am merely quoting Mrinal Sen, who is saying Vertov did. That is all. That is all that I'm doing. But you are only helping me make my point even more strongly. So thank you so much for that. Right. So we shall we will take the questions in a reverse chronological order about the question about labor strike. And did Mrinal Sen, as a great filmmaker, love the the toiling laborers and want to make their lives better? Through his cinema, there is a funny story that I will talk about, and then I'll try to be a little more serious. So when we are talking about Chorus was not well received at all when it was screened publicly. It got a lot of awards, especially National Film Award. But there are reports that in one cinema hall in Calcutta, when Chorus was being screened, people asked for subtitles. Bengali audience asked for subtitles because they said this is incomprehensible. We don't understand what is going on. So yes, of course, although not a member of any communist party, quite left in his beliefs, Sen is of course on the side of the laboring people. But the films that he's making, are they the films that would be screened among the laboring people? Perhaps not. And that's also not always important. We will come back to Anindo's comments on the patterns. Thank you for drawing another parallel between the, I think the wall that they're walking by is a factory wall. And, in Akshonge, there are multiple instances of how people are coming out of the factory. So if the union is a Congressy union, then the workers will not come out of the factory. They will secretly give money to the marching workers because they are they're ruled by a congressive union. But if it is not a congressive union, if it's a trade union congress union, then they would, as soon as the bell would ring for the day, they would open the gates, they will rush. And there are so many instances in Akshange in which they would have to walk a few miles more, like 6 miles more every night or every evening, because they should also visit these other factories or these other villages, because they have become now so much more popular, right? So yes, I think this is a deliberate parallel, the starkness of the fallow field and the very patterned wall, but also it's also true that our highways are high. Roads are not what villages are like. And in one instance where we find Bhim Mondal, who's in actuality Bhim Mondal, here an unnamed character, running up to the workers and to say, I want to join you after my young son has died, that contrast becomes even more quite stark. About the musical score, I think that may have been one reason why people did not like this so much. Because this is a film which is also, and there are shots in which you have, like, at the beginning we have the shots of the famine bodies, right? And then we have shots of people being beaten and their faces are contorted in agony. And the score is this quite a melodious, funny, upbeat score. So there's a juxtaposition which is quite stark. And I think that is one of the reasons. I like it very much. I think that heightens the absurdity of our lives under capitalism. But I don't think that is something that most people liked so much. Okay, city, you asked whether the city can be considered as a character in Mrinal Sen's cinema. I think that is the dominant way in which at least the Calcutta Trilogy has been read. It's unfortunate that despite his centenary, there has not been extensive critical engagement with Mrinal Sen's work. Most critical engagement has happened with the Calcutta Trilogy, but and some of that has indeed been by thinking of it as city as a character in that film. But city also becomes a character not so obviously, and this I'm drawing on Moinak Biswas's unpublished work, and he's done a couple of lectures on Mrinal Sen's films after Ekdin Protidin. And we know this, in many, many interviews, Sen talks about how he's trying to attack the enemy within. He says this has to be cut down to size, right? But Moinak Biswas also shows how his material circumstances changes. He goes from Monohar Pukur to Poddo Pukur to Beltola Flat. His films also move inwards. Then you have, say, in Chalchitro and other films, we also see the transition from coal to gas, right? That is also the city, which is a remarkable way in which we can go beyond just looking at the landmarks of the city and thinking about the city in its material manifestation, which is not necessarily outside, but inside, just as Sen himself is also looking inside. I think that answered. Yeah.
Is there any other question? Yes.
প্রথমত একটা সংশোধন আমার মনে হয়, আমি বাংলাতেই বলছি প্লিজ। প্রথমত একটা সংশোধন, আকাশ কুসুম সম্পর্কে বলতে গিয়ে তুমি যেটা বলেছ যে পত্রযুদ্ধ হয়েছিল, সেটা মূলত হয়েছিল আশিস বর্মন, সত্যজিৎ রায় এবং মৃণাল সেনের মধ্যে। এবং আশিস বর্মনের চিঠি দিয়েই প্রথম শুরু হয় স্টেটসম্যান পত্রিকায়, এবং পরবর্তীকালে সেই চিঠিগুলো একসঙ্গে বাঞ্চ করে, আমার যতদূর মনে আছে, কান উৎসব কর্তৃপক্ষ একটা বই বার করেছিলেন। আর দ্বিতীয় আর একটা আমার সংযোজন হচ্ছে রাইনার্ড হফের ছবিটা। রাইনার্ড শেষে আবার যখন এলেন, আমি প্রত্যেকবারই সঙ্গে ছিলাম, রাইনার্ড মৃণালদা আমরা যখন ঘুরছিলাম, তখন রাইনার্ড ওই যে ছেলেটি বাঁশের ওপর উঠে আর ওইটার কথা যখন বলছে, তার পরেই কিন্তু অন্য কয়েকজনের প্রশ্নের উত্তর এখানে পাওয়া যায়। তখনই মৃণালদাকে জিজ্ঞেস করছেন রাইনার্ড, হাউ ডু ইউ প্লেস ইয়োর সেলফ ভিসাভিস মার্কসিজম। তারপরে মৃণালদার একটা লম্বা উত্তর আছে। আমি জানি না, তুমি নিশ্চয়ই দেখেছো সেটা, রাইনার্ড হফের ছবিটা। খুব কম লোকই দেখেছে, আমার ধারণা এখানেও খুব কম লোক দেখেছে। আমার কাছে আছে ছবি, রাইনার্ডের নিজের দেওয়া ছবি আছে VHS-এ। আর তৃতীয় আর একটা যেটা নিয়ে এখানে আলোচনা শুরু, এবং আমার বন্ধু রণবীর যেটা নিয়ে মূলত কাজ করছে, উদ্বাস্তু এবং তাদের স্থান পরিবর্তন। এই ক্ষেত্রে মৃণাল সেন তথা দীনেশচন্দ্র সেনের ফরিদপুরের পরিবারের এই যে স্থান পরিবর্তন 1941 সালে মৃণাল সেন এসেছেন, 42 সালে পবিত্র সেন সপরিবারে এসেছেন, সকলে মিলে থাকতে শুরু করেন মনোহরপুকুরের পরে তারপর তারা এলেন মতিলাল নেহেরু রোডে, 4E মতিলাল নেহেরু রোড, তারপরে বেলতলা। মৃণালদা সেই জন্যে বহু জায়গায়, একাধিক জায়গায় লিখেছেন, কলকাতায় আমার কোনো বাড়ি নেই। এবং এই পুরো পরিবারটা এসেছিল একসঙ্গে। আরেকজনের নাম সবাই আমরা এখানে প্রায় কেউ জানিই না, এবং সেটা সবসময় আমরা বাদ দিয়ে দিই। সেটা হচ্ছে পবিত্র সেন, মৃণাল সেনের ওপরের দাদা। এই যে কতগুলো ঘটনার কথা তুমি বললে, যেগুলো গোলাম কুদ্দুস লিপিবদ্ধ করেছেন, তার সঙ্গে মৃণালদার জড়িয়ে পড়া। আমি যেহেতু দীর্ঘদিন একসঙ্গে গল্প করেছি, আড্ডা দিয়েছি, সেটা পবিত্র সেন কমিউনিস্ট পার্টির সদস্য। পবিত্র সেন এসেছিলেন, মৃণাল সেন এসেছিলেন 41 সালে, পবিত্র সেন এসেছিলেন 40 সালে ফরিদপুর থেকে, এবং দীনেশচন্দ্র সেন পুরো পরিবার নিয়ে চলে এলেন তারা 42 সাল নাগাদ। মৃণাল সেন স্কটিশে এসে ভর্তি হলেন, এবং ওই সময়তে ফরিদপুর থেকে যারা এলেন, পবিত্র সেন তখন বাইটন কাপে হকি খেলতেন। ঘটনাচক্রে বার্নপুরে ওই আসানসোল অঞ্চলে তিনি চাকরিতে ঢোকেন এবং কমিউনিস্ট পার্টির সঙ্গে জড়িয়ে পড়েন। কমিউনিস্ট পার্টির সঙ্গে জড়িয়ে পড়া পবিত্র সেনের ধরা পড়েন তেভাগ আন্দোলনের তৃতীয় পর্যায়ের শেষে, কমিউনিস্ট পার্টির বিটি রণধীবে লাইনের একটা পর্যায়ে। এবং পবিত্র সেনকে যখন আসানসোল থেকে মেদিনীপুর জেলে নিয়ে যাওয়া হচ্ছে, পবিত্র সেন ট্রেন থেকে ঝাঁপ মেরে পালান। তারপরে পবিত্র সেনকে আবার পার্ক সার্কাসে পুলিশ, ঘটনাচক্র, সেটা লম্বা গল্প, আমি যাচ্ছি না। মৃণালদার সঙ্গে আমার অনেকবারই কথা হয়েছে এই যে জায়গা পাল্টানো, কিন্তু সবটাই কিন্তু দক্ষিণ কলকাতার দেশপ্রিয় পার্ক অঞ্চল থেকে। ইদানিংকালে শতবার্ষিকী উপলক্ষে কয়েকজন ছবি টবি করলেন, তাদেরকেও আমি নিয়ে ওই অঞ্চলগুলো ঘুরেছি, দেখিয়েছি, এবং তারা কিন্তু, তাদেরকে সকলের কাছেই আমার বলার এইটাই যে মৃণাল সেনের এই ছবিগুলো, তার সঙ্গে এই উদ্বাস্তু পরিবারের চলে আসা ওপার বাংলা থেকে এবং কলকাতায় একটা সুস্থিতি জায়গা না পাওয়া, যেটা মৃণাল সেন, কেউ হয়তো ভাবলে আশ্চর্য হবে, মৃণাল সেন নিজের বাড়ি হলো যখন, সেটাও নিজের বাড়ি নয়, কুণাল একটা আস্তানা কিনলো পদ্মপুকুর রোডে, 38 পদ্মপুকুর রোডে। যখন আমরা প্রথম দেখতে গেলাম, তখন মৃণালদা বললেন, অধ্যক্ষ এটা তো আমার বাড়ি হবে না, এটাও তো কুণালেরই, বাবুরই বাড়ি হবে, আমাদের আর বাড়ি হলো না, বুঝলে। ধন্যবাদ।
এরপরে তো আমার বলার কিছু থাকে না, but I will just give an anecdote simply because I have read Ekshonge and none of you have had the fortune to read it yet. I hope you get to read it, except that I've reserved both copies in National Library, so you cannot get it. But let's see. So while the workers are marching from Raniganj, several places along the way, especially in Srirampur and later on in other places of Hooghly and then in Calcutta, Udbastu Kollan Shomitis are giving them felicitation. They're felicitating them. So when we teach partition, I teach 2 courses of partition, one in the undergraduate and the other in the postgraduate level. We teach Ritik Ghatok. We do not teach Mrinal Sen. And it's often remarked that Mrinal Sen's Calcutta is the Calcutta of famines. It is not the Calcutta of partition. And I don't know why that is. You probably have a better answer than I do for it. But I felt that it's also interesting to think about how, and so much work that earlier CRG has done and later our friend Onisha has done, has also thought about how refugee movements become working class movements. And here, at least in this small document of just 92 people's walk for 150 kilometers, we find how so many refugee organizations are willing to call the working class movement their own. That's all.
So thanks to everybody, thanks to Samata, thanks to the, people. Pardon? Yes. There is an announcement. I think, Samata, you can do it.
So as Poshali said at the beginning, and then Ranubidya also said, we are trying to hold 10 lectures on various facets of the city of Calcutta and the city, as it were, called City Lights, in different institutions of Calcutta. So the 4th lecture of the series is scheduled to be held on 31st January at St. Xavier's College, right across the road from here. We do not know the time yet, or do we know the time?
In the afternoon.
So because it's an educational institution, it will take place in the afternoon, but you are all welcome to come. We have your email IDs. I think maybe we will let you know. So, yes, Professor Shoboshaji Shurai Chaudhuri, who is our colleague, friend, and also the president of Calcutta Research Group and professor of political science at Rabindra Bharati University, will be talking about new labor in the city. So I think it will be an excellent continuation from whatever we have watched. We looked at the history. We will be looking forward to the present moment and the future with that. So over to Poshali.
And all of you are invited. Poshali?
Yeah, so the announcement has been done by Samata. I don't have anything else to say, but thanks a lot for coming here, and the room is full, and we are also, our hearts are full with the interaction and this beautiful depiction and the lecture. And yes, see you again, hopefully in the coming lectures, and we'll carry on the interaction. Thank you.